program today is entitled Living Legend Lawyers, Hawaii's 3D Pioneers. Our episode today is Growing Big Firms on Bishop Street. Our special guests, to my left, Jim Campbell, who has bar three-digit number 135, Dan Case in the middle, who is 139, and his brother Jim Case, who has bar number 837. My name is Greg Markham, and we're going to be interviewing these gentlemen about their experiences as attorneys in our state. We are broadcasting live from the basement of the Pioneer Plaza here in downtown Honolulu. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi.
Could you, Jim, could you start this conversation off by telling us where you went to law school and what year you graduated and when you first became an attorney in our state, or territory if it were?
It was a territory. I graduated from Yale in 1952, and then I went in the Army, served in Korea, and came back and went to Stanford Law School, where I graduated. I was going to stay in California, but I decided to come home. Everybody told me there was no room for any lawyers here at that time, so I decided to give it a try anyway. So I got a job with Cade, Schutte, Fleming, and Wright. And that firm has been on the corner of King and Bishop Street in 3 different buildings. The old Bishop Trust building, which was Eva Mackay corner, the old bank building, which was Diamond Head Mackay, and the present building that they're in, which is Mauka Eva corner of King and Bishop Street.
Could you tell us a little bit about the history of Cade Schutte? When did it become a firm, if you know?
It became a firm in 1922. Our founder was Smith, of Smith, Weil, Beebe, and Cades. Smith came from Bangor, Maine, and he was primarily engaged in business matters. Wild had come down originally to be in the Freer firm, but he didn't like it over there, so he came to work for us. And then Beebe had been a partner of Thompson earlier. He was a very good trial attorney and my mentor when it comes around to trying lawsuits. And Beebe was one of these tough old guys. He had been a sailor in World War I and had tattoos on his arm, but he was a hell of a lawyer. And Cades, Russell Cades, came down in the 1930s, and he worked in business matters, and during the war he worked primarily with the Corps of Engineers and the contractors that worked with the Corps of Engineers, because everything was cost plus then. I remember talking to George Freitas and saying, George, he was the head of Pacific Construction, how come you and Russell had lunch all the time? You know that Russell was going to bill you. Yeah, he says, but I just marked it up 10% and gave it to the government.
Well, thank you.
And so we changed, when Mr. Smith died, the Bar Association said you can't continue practicing law with the name of a decedent. So the name of the firm was changed, and then 20 years later they revoked their ruling, and we went from Smith, Weil, Beebe, and Cades to Cade, Schutte, Fleming, and Wright, and now to Cade, Schutte.
And Jim, when did you first go to work there? And did you have any other jobs besides that one as a lawyer?
No, I've never had a job as a lawyer before.
And have you had any other jobs since as a lawyer?
No, only I did not intend to stay with Smith Wild, but I went to work there in December of 1957 at the awesome pay of $350 a month. I was paid more than that in the Army. But anyway, my wife was making more than I was. Anyway, I liked the work and I liked the people I worked with. And for a long time, there were 8 in the firm, 7 partners and 1 associate. I was the associate. And, but I liked working with the people there, and I continued. And I spent most of my time working with Mr. Beebe and Mr. Cades. So I tried a lot of cases on the out islands, and as time went on, I did a lot of work in the antitrust field and SEC work and litigation of high-rise construction, and worked with contractors in the administration of building high-rise buildings. And I had worked on the first high-rise, what I call the afterbirth of the first high-rise tower in Waikiki, the second one, Princess Kailani Hotel. It was the first high-rise to be built with a climbing crane. And when I say the afterbirth, in those days, when any project was over, the litigation would start. I think it's changed quite considerably since then.
Well, thank you, Jim, for that background. Dan, how about you? Where did you go to school, and when did you take the bar, and where did you go to work, and how long did you stay at that job?
Yeah. Well, both my brother Jim and I grew up in Lihue, Kauai, and we both went to Puno. There used to be a boarding school. And my graduating class was 1942. Not a great year because after Pearl Harbor, the engineers took over the campus and closed the dormitory. And luckily, our cousins, the Morgan family, took me in and housed me and everything until April. And I didn't graduate with my class, but all the colleges, particularly in the East Coast, started in June in reference to the war to get people educated before they had to go into service.
Okay.
So I went to Williams College for, in effect, 6 semesters in a row, and I joined the Navy V-12 program, and so at the end of 3 school semesters, I went to midshipman school and got my ensign's commission when I was 19. And then I was in the Navy for 3 more years. I had a year to go, so after I was discharged in 1947, I was discharged in the mainland because that's where I signed up. And it was kind of expensive coming home and not a good place. It's still pretty dangerous. So I went with a very good friend to Denver, wait in April. I had to wait for September before I could go back to Williams. And
what did you do in Denver for that period?
well, I wasn't smart. My friend's father owned a hotel in a sort of a third-rate district, and I was visiting with him and looked across the street. There was an Owl Cafe for sale for $3,000. That happened to be exactly my severance pay. So, foolishly probably, I bought the restaurant and worked for about a nickel an hour for a year and a half before I could sell it. But I finished my college career at University of Denver, my senior year in effect. Sure. And then decided to go to law school, and I was still there after I sold the restaurant. My father's friend suggested that his son and I take over the hotel he had. He had faith in me and his son. Mm-hmm. So he gave us a free lease, and we started operating, and that put us through law school.
What was the name of the hotel, Dan?
Columbia Hotel.
Columbia Hotel.
So,
near downtown Denver?
Pardon me?
Was it near downtown?
Yeah, it was downtown near the stations.
Okay.
Third-rate hotel, I might say. The rate
I think it was closer to the railroad station.
Okay,
well,
Union
the rates
Station.
went from $1 to $2.50, so they give you a clue.
Per night.
Yeah. Anyhow, after that, I came back and took the bar, but was looking for a job. And as Jim mentioned, jobs were not easy to get then. I applied to the Attorney General and the city and county, and Jim, which he can tell you, had started with Pratt, Tavares, and Cassidy, and then was lured away, I guess, by the Carl Smith firm in Hilo. So he just left when I was looking for a job, so I applied there, and they were a little hila about hiring me. They were afraid I was going to work a couple of years and quit and join Jim. But I said, no, I'm not. So they finally hired me. I started work on October 27, 1952, and carried through for 60 years and retired December 31st, 2012. So that's the only job I have except for the Navy.
Except for the Navy.
Except for the Navy, yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
And the firm was Pratt, Tavares, and Cassidy. And at that time, there were 4 firms called a large firm of about 10, give or take 9, 10, or 11 each. One was Smith, Weil, Beebe, and Cades. One was Anderson, Wren, and Jenks. And one was Robertson, Castle, and Anthony, all about the same size. And I might say we sort of grew together. They're all good firms, good lawyers. We were pretty close back in those days. And the only thing people don't realize today is, not necessarily proudly, but we were still Howley firms. Okay. And it took a little while before all of a sudden we all realized we were losing good lawyers. And so we hired a young guy, great guy, Jerry Sakia, as our break into the non-Howley group, and then we followed that with further hires and women. The first woman we found was Rosalind Loomis, who was district court judge on Maui now.
Okay.
And that broke the women's barrier. From then on, we've grown. I think right now our firm is 25, 26 lawyers. I'm not around anymore. But they're about a third Howley, about a third Asian, not Japanese and Chinese mainly, and about a third women. So
nice integration.
Pardon?
That integration that occurred over the years.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
So.
And you went to, where did you go to law school?
Well, University of Denver.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. And you graduated what year?
1952.
Okay. And then came straight back to Hawaii to take the bar exam?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember how many were in your bar exam class when you were sworn in?
It wasn't a huge number. 50 or so would not surprise me. And you only gave it once a year, so you had to work hard. And so I was unmarried, so I went back to Kauai, stayed with my dad, and while I studied pretty hard. Every afternoon I went to Renike's to body surf, but there.
Nice.
Then I came back and I had my job and I started work.
That's wonderful.
I might say one thing: we all used to grade bar exams. That's probably still done, but we used to go to a hotel. Maybe they still do. I don't know. We happened to go to the Hilton one of the years I was doing it. Charlie Wickman, Jim's partner, and I shared a room, and it was hot, and we were watching. So I put my papers out on the porch, and he worked inside. And a gust of wind took all of the exams out the window and down, to my horror. So I went over and looked down. I couldn't see him, but I don't see him on the ground. So I said to Charlie, you got to watch out. I got to go get a janitor. And I went in. Believe it or not, every exam had landed in the balcony, right below. Otherwise, I'd have been shot.
Yes, thank goodness. I was gonna ask you, did everybody pass that question that year?
Yeah.
But you did find them.
I found them all.
Good.
Just within 15 minutes.
Great.
Anyhow.
That's funny.
I graded bar exams for many years.
Yeah, we all did.
You know, all three of you.
Oh,
I did not know.
You did not.
he went to Hilo.
I was living in Hilo a lot of this time.
Well, Jim, let's get to you. You've got the bar number 837. Your brother Dan has bar number 139. The first question I have of you is, why are you 700
know.
numbers?
Somebody must have had it against me. I think I'm I have practiced law longer than they have. I understood that they awarded the bar numbers. I don't think alphabetically. They had
did.
some system that I don't know what it was.
What they did is they put all the Oahu ones alphabetically and each of the out islands alphabetically, but they started on the Big Island with 800.
I see. Well, that really helps me a lot. I've been very worried about that ever since somebody had it in for
And
me.
Maui had a different starting number, and so did.
As I said earlier this afternoon, this is a very nice time for me because I started practicing law 65 years ago tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
With Pratt Tavares and Cassidy. I was born in Lihue, Kauai, went to Lihue Grammar School there. I think it's probably useful in my relationships with people.
Thanks. 1 second, Jim. We're on a break. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Going to a break. Thanks. So when we get back, I want you to pick up.
Aloha, welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii. My name is Josh Green. I'm the host of a program called Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department on the Big Island. I also serve in the state senate, which, please don't hold that against me, doesn't detract from my television program. We speak about all the big healthcare issues in the state. We get together on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we try to talk about the most important issues in healthcare. This is a terrific venue for people to learn about healthcare. There are many programs on this station. We broadcast it later, not just on the internet, but also on OC16. Thanks for joining us. Please be informed healthcare consumers.
Thank you. And welcome to Living Legend Lawyers, Hawaii's 3D Pioneers. Our topic today is growing big firms on Bishop Street, and we have three big firm lawyers with us today. Jim Campbell, Dan Case, and Jim Case. Bar numbers 135, 137, and 837. I'm the host today, Greg Markham. And Jim, you were telling us about your experience going to the...
I wanted to tell you a little bit about experiencing going to grammar school, elementary school, in a place like Lihue, Kauai. We had 120 students in our class. I was the only haole out of 120 students. Most of them were Japanese, many Chinese, Hawaiian, etc., etc. So my family was strict. I was supposed to talk English at home. The classroom was strict. I had to talk English. But on the playgrounds, we talked pidgin. So I got dizzy sometimes, and where the heck am I? Well, I had to switch from pidgin to English every time I went into the classroom. Then switch back again when I got out. But our schools at that time were really very good. It's wrong to think that they weren't good. They were very good. In fact, in some respects, I think the elementary school I went to was better than it now exists today. But I was fortunate. One thing wrong, good and bad, about being the oldest child in the family, which I was, my brother Dan and I had a brother Bill halfway between us. The Wilcox, my father wasn't earning very much at that time when I graduated from elementary school. The recession was on full steam. But I got a scholarship from the George Norton Wilcox Foundation to send me to Puno for 4 years. So I went to the boarding department. I had a very good career at Puno. I was valedictorian of my class in elementary school and again at Puno.
Congratulations.
And so I applied to only one college. I thought Williams College. And they awarded me a scholarship also. So I went to Williams College. I graduated in 1941. By that time, everybody in my class, I'm going to step back. In the fall, I decided to go to law school. I majored in chemistry, didn't like it, didn't want to make a career out of it. I decided to go to law school. Our grandfather was a lawyer on Maui something like 50 years.
And his
Judge
name?
Daniel Hebert Case. My brother is named after him. And my great-grandfather was a lawyer in Topeka, Kansas, as well as my great-grandmother, who was the first woman lawyer in Kansas. So they lived half a block from the courthouse. When I visited them in the summer, I'd go over and listen into the court. So I decided to apply to law school. And I only applied to one law school. I was applied to Yale, and I got admitted to Yale. But I then could see that I would never make it through law school. All of my classmates and I knew we would be at war with Germany. I knew something more. I thought we'd be at war with Japan. And so we all applied for commissions. My eyesight was slightly nearsighted. I couldn't get into an officer training school. And so I said, I don't want to be drafted and peel potatoes. So I came back here to Oahu, got a job with the Army Corps of Engineers. And I was one of the ones that ousted Punahou School and closed it down on December 7th.
Did you displace your little brother?
All the Punahou students were displaced overnight.
Didn't even
Talk
know.
about
I didn't even know he
accident.
was there.
No accident. It was pre-planned. So I worked for the Army Corps of Engineers. I was here at Pearl Harbor. Then I decided to try again for the Navy, and I got a commission in the Navy. Practiced as a lawyer at sea most of the time on Navy, destroyers in the Western Pacific. And at the end of the war, for some strange reason, my ship got sent to Boston, and where I was going to be released. I decided Cambridge and Boston was a pretty nice place to live, better than New Haven, I thought. So I went over to Harvard. I had a couple of people in my Harvard class, incidentally, one of them, Harold Wright, who graduated 4 months before I did. Paige Anderson at Anderson and Jenks graduated 4 months before I did. And they let me in. They said, well, go up here in September. This was 1946 by now, so I did. So I went to Harvard Law School, met my wife there. She went to Wellesley, and then we had to decide where to live. And I lived in Southern California, San Diego in the Navy, Miami, Florida in the Navy, Massachusetts 7 years by then. She grew up in Missouri. So she said, why don't we live in Missouri? I said, there's no ocean. I can't live there. No ocean. So she said, you know, I don't want to live here either. So we came back.
There was a lake in the Ozarks.
Yeah. Well, I know. That's about 150 miles away.
Okay.
And I got an ocean close to me. So I met Wendell L. Carl Smith, who interviewed at the Harvard Law School for a new lawyer. He wanted to expand his firm. He had 4 lawyers, largest firm on the outside islands. But I promised my wife's parents that she could finish college. And she had a year to go. And so we had to live in Honolulu. So I went to him and I said, I signed up for 8 o'clock interview anyway. I thought I'd see whether I could get some help from him. I said, I can't work for you, but how about giving me some help? What are the law firms in Honolulu, and which one should I apply to? And he said, well, there are 4. The one I know the best is Pratt, Tavares & Cassidy. I'm a labor lawyer in the state, and I work closely with them. I do sugar work, so I know them the best. I'll go back and tell them that you would like a job here. So I thanked him, didn't know what would happen. I wrote Paige Anderson. I said, well, what are the law firms here available? I suspect I can't work for you. What other ones should I work for? I accepted the job from Pratt, Tavares & Cassidy, and lo and behold, Anderson and Jenks sent me an offer. On the other hand, Smithwell, Beebe, and Cade said they just hired Harold Wright. They had no room for anybody else. So I couldn't get a job with them. So I started Pratt, Tavares & Cassidy, October 1, 1949. As an associate, we had 10 lawyers. We had 3 associates, actually. And at that time, there were 4 big law firms. I'll just mention them again. Smithwell, Beebe, and Case, Anderson and Jenks, Robertson, Castle, and Anthony. My recollection was they all had 10 lawyers in one way or another. There were 2 5-lawyer firms, which are still practicing today. One under such a different name is not recognizable, Fong, Miho, and Choi, and Henshaw, Conroy, and Hamilton. Other than that, they were all sole practitioners or dual partners. On the outside islands, there was only one firm larger than either, mostly sole practitioners. So comparing then and now, the firm at that time, you had to be somewhat of a generalist. You got to know everything. But on the other hand, you also specialized several areas of the law within your firm. So they weren't specialized like they are today. Today, the large firms have grown more and more specialized. So the type of law is different in that sense. There were, and also law, usually has to proceed after business. I don't just mean getting clients. I mean what's going on in business governs the kind of law you practice in that locality. At that time, the Big Five did control most of the business of Hawaii. Sugar and pineapple were the business in Hawaii. And what happened in Honolulu was all ancillary to that.
Sure.
Now, you had other clients, the banks, two of them, and you had other people in the vicinity, the dealerships, auto dealerships, and other things that had to go along to service the people. But your work was helping the big businesses in their corporate law, their labor law, land law, very important, of course, tax law, etc., and the various routines that we still practice.
Jim, can I have the three of you comment on, you joined existing firms.
Right.
And those existing firms still exist today.
That's correct.
But you took them from, a firm of 10 lawyers and 2 or 3 associates, or 10 lawyers and 1 associate, to what they've become. Can each of you tell us about what it was like building a big firm on Bishop Street during your careers?
Well, I could start. I think the real shakeup in Hawaiian law occurred with the jet airplane. It wasn't statehood. It was the jet airplane. It opened up every island to tourism. There was no tourist infrastructure for the islands. There were no hotels to speak of. The roads and bridges were bad. And it threw the whole state into a great big construction boom. People were coming down from the mainland to work in construction here. We were building hotels. At one time I worked on, there were something like 60 tower cranes in Honolulu, and I was working either for the contractor, the subcontractors, or somebody on 35 of those projects. And we all just really worked hard. We were open all day Saturday. We were supposed to only work a half a day. You wore a suit half a day and took the coat off on Saturday afternoon. I mean, my uniform was a dark suit with a white shirt and 6 pairs of black socks and 3 pairs of black shoes. Fortunately, Bellinger called Fred Shetty up one day and said, "We have adopted aloha shirts on Friday, and if you ever send another lawyer over here without an aloha shirt on Friday, we're going to fire you." So we all went out and bought aloha shirts.
Jim, do you remember approximately what year that was?
Gee, that was probably in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
I'll make a comment. When I left Cage Shetty, there were 83 lawyers.
We're going to go off the air for 1 second.
Okay.
And then we'll be right back. Thank you. Gregory Markham.
Aloha, my name is Daniel Luke, and this is my co-host, Ing. We'll be here every other Monday on New Media, The Bleeding Edge on ThinkTech, talking about the intersection of social media and the news. We'll cover technology, trends, and other fun stuff. Did I leave anything out?
Well, I'm here to keep you honest, so that's my job, to remind you of everything you've forgotten and to challenge you at every point.
Excellent. My wife tells me that I'm wrong about quite a lot.
Thank you, and welcome back to Living Legend Lawyers, Hawaii's 3D Pioneers. With me, Jim Campbell, Dan Case, and Jim Case. Jim, you were telling us about taking the firm that you worked with from the beginning up to a firm from, say, 10 lawyers and a few associates to...
I think there were 8 lawyers.
8 lawyers,
Yeah.
thank you. To what it's become today. And how that happened, the evolution.
Well, what happened really was our partners decided they wanted to keep all of the clients we had. We could, if we didn't want to grow and keep up with them, we were going to lose them.
Okay.
And then we were bringing in new clients, and so we just kept growing. And I found out that the dynamics of each size law firm is different. I mean, I thought working in a law firm with approximately 25 lawyers was probably the best experience I had in a law firm. After that, there are too many people. You have to have rules and regulations, and secretaries would take advantage of the rules and regulations. And it was just more people problems and really a lot of people wanted to bother with, but we wanted to keep our clients and service them, and we did.
And that's what ended up growing the firm.
Yeah, well,
The need to
there-
service the clients.
I would have been perfectly happy not to work as hard as I did. The first 20 years I was in that firm, we couldn't get enough lawyers to do all the work we had, so we did it ourselves. We all worked weekends. I mean, this idea of taking a Saturday off was ridiculous.
Dan, how about you? Tell us about your experience of growing
Well,
the Bishop Street Law Firm.
well, as I say, our firm was a good firm. It was founded 125 years ago by W.O. Smith, son of a missionary doctor and apparently a wonderful guy. And he first worked in government, deputy attorney general, then he went in private practice and became part of the Revolution group, which was not looked on with favor these days. And after the Revolution, the day after the Revolution, he walked over to visit with Queen Liliuokalani and trying to make amends. Partly because of that, within just a year or two, she hired him to do her work.
Okay.
And we did,
So he did work for the Queen.
Liliuokalani Trust from then to, I don't know, many decades later. He prepared her trust, naturally her will, everything Liliuokalani had to trust before her death, and then in her death in 1917, the trustees hired us for many decades. So that was the start of it. So he was the founder of our firm. Dudley Pratt was head of Pratt, was a wonderful guy, and he was like a second father to me. He just did every kind of law, very busy.
Mm-hmm.
In 1947, Roy Vatusik, who was by then a senior partner, very Mr. Republican really in the party, I guess, that's what they tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Started dying, was weakening, and so he finally had died. And then Monty Wynn, who was another party, also died at an early age. So
Okay.
Dudley he hired Nils Tavares, who was Attorney General from Maui, and quite a nice man, a brilliant guy. And then Charlie Cassidy, who was another, they're all local,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful guy, smart. He helped in the Massey prosecution, and he became a circuit judge, apparently well thought of. And so he formed a new firm, Pratt, Tavares, and Cassidy. And so I was fortunate enough to work with them all and join them, and little by little they passed away, and so the normal succession of law firm came around.
Right.
So we got a little bit bigger, but not too much. And I had the idea, strategy I guess you'd call it, to try and move to the neighbor islands. Our father was office manager and treasurer and vice president of Grove Farm Company on Kauai with Sugar Company, and he handled most of the business matters. Every time he needed a lawyer, though, he flew or rode to Honolulu with Pickett. And even as a little bit later we had a merger with Koloa Sugar Company, he hired Urban Wild from Cade Schutte, then Smith Wild began Cade, to do the work. So after I'd gotten there and thought about it and tried to think of some way to be different from the other firms, I decided to spread our firm to the other islands.
Okay.
So,
And which islands did you go to?
well, we went to Kauai as the first one.
Okay.
Maui was the second one. Then we merged with a Cook Choi Quidquid firm, and they had offices in Hilo and Kona. So we ended up with all those offices. We had some good lawyers there, all of them. The firms were good, but when the Iniki struck, it struck Kauai particularly
1992.
badly,
Right.
and literally washed out our office, files and everything. And so it cost us a lot of money to reconstruct and put them all back to work and everything. Indirectly, the same tsunami affected the business in the other islands, and so particularly Kona and Hilo, where the tourists used to start coming.
Right.
And first thing you know, they're all struggling. So after that, we were actually losing money on my strategy. So we turned all the offices over to the partners there and came back. And we were up to about 85 lawyers from different places.
Wow.
I thought it was a good firm and that worked everywhere. But after that, we got back to 25 or so lawyers.
Came back to Honolulu, so to speak.
Just Honolulu.
Right.
And as Jim said, it's a good number. You can still be collegial,
Yes.
Yeah.
and yet you can work together.
25's the number.
So the number was,
Around there.
the
Yeah,
growth
it really was.
the attempt to bring in all the neighbor island business, to be perfectly honest, but all kinds of business. And it didn't work super because they were good enough lawyers. They're supposed to. The theory was they would call Honolulu for the expertise, the specialists. Well, they're good enough lawyers. They call occasionally for help, but they never turned over matters. And so it cost us another 15% to administer all the offices. So in effect, that's our pattern of our growth, and in effect, our reduction also.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Jim, I think our audience wants to know why it is over the years that you and your brother never actually practiced in the same law firm.
I think it was accidental in the sense that I made a decision to move to the Carlsbad office in Hilo. And so when he came here, he just started a different law firm. But both of us, I think, were happy with what we were doing. I just do say one thing, that I think Danny and I had not a written, but I had an implicit understanding that if he had a client first, I was not going to take a case personally against him. I always, if I liked the case, I withdrew from it, got out of the way, and turned over to one of my partners. But I never even wanted to negotiate with him, because you get mad at the other lawyers sometimes. And
I've heard it happens.
So yes, and so I often referred matters to their firm. Very often I'm in a conflict and I refer matters.
Right.
But I think that other than the fact that he's very tough at me at bridge, and so is Campbell here at bridge, we've gotten along pretty well in spite of the fact we've been competitors now. We maybe want the same client, but we didn't make it personal.
I see.
I agree with that. It was a gentleman's agreement we never discussed. But
So
it worked.
So I think that one thing that these two guys will agree with me on was that when you had 4 firms of 10 lawyers each, all good firms, you got to know everybody
Yeah.
in the community because all the business, most of it was going to one of these firms. And so you dealt with everybody. And since we were not that specialist, I often managed litigation. Later on, I got out of it, but I managed it. That means I worked with a client on what's our strategy, but I never went to court. I found difficulty going to court, so I got out of it. That's one of the things to do. If you're not good at something, get out of it. So that was important. Now, another thing that I think that is important, it's very easy for the lawyer coming out and working today to work under the communication conditions of the day. But at that time, in 1949, we barely had a telephone to the mainland. It was so expensive you didn't use it.
Mm-hmm.
The telephone to the outer islands was very expensive. You did everything by letter. Ships came in once a week from the mainland, but you had airplane service, but you had to write letters. That forced you to really be a lot more careful than just writing a quick email to
Yes.
somebody. So communications were not like they are today, not instantaneous emails. And it forced a different kind of practice of law in those days. Some of my practice, and I want to go just briefly over it because with what Jim Campbell and Danny have said about the growth of law firms,
Mm-hmm.
the growth of the law firms I had was with the Carl Smith firm,
Yes.
which I moved over there in November 1951.
Did it come from Honolulu, Jim?
No, Carl
or did it
Smith is
originate
the
on the-
oldest law firm in the state. I like to always say that. 1857. It had always been a Big Island law firm, but it got very big on the Big Island. We represented all the Big Five in the Big Island, except Alexander Baldwin. They stayed out of the Big Island for some reason. But Carl Smith had developed. But if you want to grow your firm, or if you want to stay the way you are, every law firm will have somebody or group of people that are running it. Sometimes it's just one major figure, like Garner Anthony at Robinson, Castle and Anthony. Nobody else mattered over there. He did everything. But sometimes you have a group of 2 people or 3 people, but somebody has to be in charge. And the issue I see in why law firms and law firms, a lot of it comes from what do the people in charge want to do? Do they want to grow their firm? Or they want to just stay it the way it is and earn as much as they can and let it dismantle when they've gone? So you have to have you ought to have a vision
Okay.
of what you want. And Wendell Carl Smith in our firm had a vision. He didn't want to be a Big Island firm anymore. He wanted to do work in the whole state. And with that vision, you do a lot of things. You hire the best lawyers you can. He went and interviewed all over the United States to try to bring good lawyers to the firm. Of course, you can't grow unless you do good work. That really is the bottom of all of it, no matter what. If you're a small firm and 2 and you want to be 3, you got to do good work so you get the oral recommendations from people somebody trusts. I want to do something. I want to go to the SEC. Who can do the SEC work? And what kind of recommendations will people give you? Well, you better not use them, or is it a positive one? So you got to start with good work and having happy clients who recommend you to the next person. So on the growth of the firm, I agree with Jim that on the tourism industry and the jet. When I started working in Honolulu and in Hilo, all the hotels were in Waikiki for the whole state, except a small little hotel called the Volcano House.
Oh, at
And
the park.
and Kona Inn had been built. The Lihue Hotel on Kauai, was the businessman's hotel. All these other hotels were businessmen's hotels. They weren't tourist hotels. For example, we got the account of Inter-Island Resorts just before I joined the firm. And so I got in on the beginning of the growth of the tourist industry in the outside islands. So I was lucky. Anyway, that's a little bit to agree. The jet,
Thank
though, is what really did it.
Thanks, Jim. Well, we've been talking with three distinguished members of our Bar Association, all having 3 digits. Jim Campbell at 135, Dan Case at 139, and his brother at 837. We've now solved that mystery. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And we hope this will be very helpful for our young members and enjoyable for all of our members. Thank you so much.
Good, we thank you.
Joining
Thank you
us
very
with
much for having us.
Hawaii's living legends, the 3D pioneers. Thank you.